What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share the video. Hit the join button and become a member. Members get exclusive content. This is part 2 of the Hugo Yogi Pinell unaliving by the whites. Just to recap a little bit. Now, as I said, Hugo is thoroughly hated, despised by the whites and by the COs, by the authority figures there in the penal system. Why? Well, again, he's accused of multiple unalivings of whites and COs. They had a target on him. They wanted him out of the shoe to rectify and to get their retribution. And Hugo's family filed a lawsuit and said that his unaliving was sponsored and set up by the state. This is what the lawsuit says. They believe that the COs set him up. First, by even letting him out of the shoe, knowing that he had this target on his back. Why let him out if he's so powerful and is accused of all of these unalivings of COs? Too dangerous, too violent to be put on the main line. But they let him out. And 5 days later, this incident took place. Now, supposedly, and I do not necessarily believe this, the whites went to the blacks and told them to get Hugo off the yard and everything would be fine. Now, since they hated him so much and had a target on his back and wanted him extinguished, I don't believe that the whites gave the blacks an opportunity to get him off of the yard. They didn't want him off the yard. They wanted him off the earth. Period. So, and if they had to come to the blacks and said this, the blacks are not going to get him off the yard since he's such a powerful figure and has such influence in the black community, particularly in the penal system. With the blacks knowing that they were not going to get him off the yard, they should have attacked the whites immediately. In my estimation, as soon as Hugo hit the yard, the blacks should have attacked the whites because they should have known that the whites were going to attack Hugo, or the police were going to do it, or they were going to find some way to get him off the yard violently. If not unalive him, certainly they were going to make an attempt to unalive him. The blacks should have known this, knowing the history of Hugo and that he had a target on his back for over 45 years. Do not even give them a chance to attack him. Attack them first is what should have happened. Since that did not happen, if the whites indeed came to the blacks and said, get him off the yard or else, and they know they was not going to get him off the yard and they shouldn't have got him off the yard, then they should have went up with the whites right then. They should have never had a chance to attack him. I don't know what the protocol was there in New Folsom and what the leadership was. But Hugo himself is a leader, a stout leader in the BGFs. But he, again, at this juncture, was old and fragile, a senior citizen, and could not really fend off an attack by two young, thirsty, bloodthirsty, hate-hungry, human flesh-mongering whites. Thus, he should have had ample security around him at all times, knowing that his life hung in the balance. But apparently, the security was not strong enough. Though he had security, it was not tight enough. And so, on this day, August 12th, 2015, Hugo was standing in the canteen line there on the yard in New Folsom. I'm sure he had his head on a swivel, watching his back, knowing that these people wanted him erased. However, him having his head on a swivel was not enough. He was approached by two whites. They drew down weapons on him and began to attack viciously. Old, fragile Hugo. Hugo, of course, tried to defend himself the best that he could, but what could he do to thwart such a vicious, bloodthirsty attack by whites that wanted him extinguished? And it was proven that it was not much he could do. The blacks on the yard recognized what was going on and began to attack the whites right there on the yard. In fact, they tried to save Hugo. They rushed up. Now, even according to Hugo's family, the COs formed a wall to stop the blacks from getting to the whites that were attacking Hugo. The blacks had weapons and were trying to get to the whites to save Hugo. They were already attacking the other whites on the yard, but the two whites that were attacking Hugo, they were trying to get to them, to attack them, to save Hugo's life. Word is, the CO set up a barricade and stopped the blacks from coming through. Meanwhile, the whites are continuing their vicious attack on Hugo. The COs are not stopping this. They're just stopping the blacks from saving it, which then, in my estimation, the blacks should have attacked the COs with the weapons. Get the fuck out of our way. We coming to save our brother. If you get in our way, then you gonna go too. But it didn't happen like this. That's what should have happened. But it didn't happen. And so they unalived Hugo right there on the yard. Stabbed him multiple upon multiple times with the cover of the COs, with the cover of the guards. The gun towers never shot, not one bullet, even though they saw this vicious attack right by the canteen, which is right under the gun tower. But they never shot. They never broke up the attack whatsoever, not until he was good and dead, which is what the COs wanted and what the whites wanted. Now, some whites were viciously attacked during this melee because it kicked off. It went up right then and there. In fact, they had one white who had a big knife in his skull. They took pictures of it and it was still in his skull. So the whites got stabbed up, but they were trying to get to the ones that did this to Hugo or were doing this to Hugo right at that moment, but they could not get to them because the police had set up a barricade. So goes the story. I wasn't there. I was in the penal system at the time, but I wasn't there in New Folsom. This is a level 4 180, New Folsom, which of course is where something like this would transpire on a level 4 180. All of them again are violent and vicious. And it went up in Salinas Valley. A few whites were attacked up there with weapons over this Hugo situation. There were a few repercussions, a bit of a blowout, because as I said before, if it's a Mexican mafia member or a powerful black, the incident will transfer to other prisons. In this situation, it really should have went up everywhere. But now, supposedly, some of the blacks were saying that since Hugo was accused of the assault, accused of the rape, that was their reasoning for not responding on his behalf when he was unalived. I don't know. Because if you believe that, then how was he a leader of the BGF? How was he a leader in the black community? And then when he's unalived, that's your reasoning, that's your excuse for not retaliating. But when he was here, people were still following his orders. There's a bit of a dichotomy there. Hypocrisy.
They brought me to Folsom in 1976. They took all the chains. They told me, you never be chained here, you never be handcuffed, and as long as you behave, then we're going to give you contact visits and treat you like everybody else. That has not been the case. I've been without chains, I've been without cuffs, I've been able to move around the guards, around the staff here, and there's no threat on my part, there's no danger on my part, you see.
Either he should have not been a leader, or if he was accepted as such, then there should have been retaliation on his behalf. At least an eye for an eye. But I'm not one to call for violence. Just self-defense. And Hugo was unalived. His family filed a lawsuit. I'm not sure exactly what happened with that lawsuit, saying that the state sponsored the unaliving, that they set it up, which I do not doubt, because the system is venal and corrupt. And they wanted him off the earth, and they accomplished their goal. He was 70 years old and had been locked up for 50 years. And had many unalivings himself, as I aforementioned, and lived a certain kind of life that really will go down in infamy. And the response is what it was. You make your own decisions as to what happened with Hugo, if he was set up or not, if the charges against him were accurate or not, if he should have ever been let out of the shoe or not, and etc. And the response, was it adequate, and or was it justified in the lack of response? Because the response for such a powerful figure was lackluster, to say the least. In my estimation, it should have never happened. As soon as he hit the yard, if I'd have been on the yard and he came to the yard, excuse me, I would have told the blacks, we have to go up immediately because they're going to try to get Hugo. So let's get ahead of the situation and attack these people. We're going to have to. That's what would have happened. That's what should have happened. That's what would have happened on most yards. So I don't know what happened there. But they unalived Hugo in August of 2015 after he served his shoe time. Coming up, I'm going to take you to a bloody removal that the others, they orchestrated in high desert. Stay free, people.